Adventure in the Thicket by J. Garrett Crow, as read by the author. All conversation ceased as the three riders entered the palmetto thicket, for the sound of the palmetto fronds rattling against the stirrups and the horses made it impossible to hear anything else. They all knew that continuing their line of discussion would have to wait until they had crossed the palmetto patch, so Sam, in the lead of their small column, had purposed to elaborate on his point until they had got right to the edge. He then turned around in his saddle, offered up his last thought, then smiled deviously. Dave knew what Sam was doing, and it annoyed him, even as he admired Sam for pulling off such timing. One thing's for sure, Sam knew the thicket. No problem, Dave thought to himself. I can wait. Although he could not hear anything other than the palmettos, which sounded like a sheet of tin warping, Dave sat back into his other senses. He looked up and appreciated that the thick clouds were throwing the woods into a deeper shade than the forest canopy would even create on its own. He felt the damp air that tortured what would normally be a cool March day into a muggy stillness. Finally, he felt old Paint slogging through the bog, slowing his normally jerky stride. Paint, well, in truth his name was Apache, but everyone called him Paint because of his dun pinto coloring, was top horse in the herd, and he was used to being in the lead. Whenever he was not, he was rough to ride, and Dave appreciated the break. It was also true that Apache wasn't particularly old, but the moniker old meant dependable and capable more than anything else. After a couple of 100 yards, the palmetto field began to fade, and they were soon surrounded by pine trees, oaks, and cypress. As soon as it was quiet enough, Sam turned back around in the saddle. As I was saying, "Oh, no, you don't," Dave responded as he trotted Paint up next to him. "You've rambled on long enough, and you know it's my turn." "Fine, if it's that important to you," Sam said good-naturedly. "What's your take on it?" "Yoda had to be talking about Han," Dave said emphatically. "No one could fly like he does, especially with the Falcon's cockpit not centered on the ship. He has to have gobs of the Force. I think he's the other hope." "I see what you're saying, but Han's just not right for it. He's the rogue, and he always will be. It's what makes the movies work." Although Dave knew that Sam did not really agree at all, he appreciated that Sam at least pretended that he considered the notion. "Nope, I think it's an all-new character that hasn't been introduced yet. After all, they introduced a new character in Empire. I think they will do the same in Revenge of the Jedi." "You know it's Return of the Jedi now," offered Dave happily, knowing he would at least win this argument. "I don't like change," Sam quipped back. After another minute or so, Dave looked back at the third rider, asking, "What do you think, Steph? It's Han, right?" Stephanie was so thrilled to be asked that she almost agreed, but she knew she had to be honest. "I know you can't think it will be a girl, but I think it's Leia. We know that she has the Force." Like his brother Sam, Dave tried to act like it was at least a plausible idea, even though he knew it couldn't be. "It's possible. It would be interesting, I guess." And the three siblings rode on in contemplative silence for the next few minutes. It was spring break of 1983, and Return of the Jedi was to be released in a couple of months. The crew had been fans of the series since they saw Star Wars in the theater when they were 8, 6, and 4, respectively. Well, Stephanie had watched it later, as she was a little young to watch such a grown-up movie when it first came out. Since then, the vast lease that their family held in southeast Texas on the edge of the Big Thicket had served as the jungle planet of Dagobah or Yavin 4, or the Peruvian jungle as they searched for ancient artifacts, as well as the outlaw hideout that it had been for them as well as their father and grandfather in their own youths. Today, the two brothers were escorting the Spanish princess through the jungles of Peru to her father the king. They were Texas Rangers, and they had been commissioned by the Spanish governor to protect her and get her from the coast to her palace or something like that. The details were not real clear, and the historical context of their fantasy was fuzzier than they liked to admit. To accomplish this mission, they had been requisitioned the 3 horses, 2 Rambo knockoff survival knives, a Daisy BB gun, and a Winchester Model 63 22 rimfire. The fact of the matter is that at 14, Samuel Crow was quickly outgrowing the play acting they did on their spring, summer, and Christmas holidays. The main inducement for today's outing had to do more with the chance to get on horseback and go into the woods with his brother than it did with the story itself. It also didn't hurt that Granddad had let him take the old 22 as well. As for his sister, she had been forced upon them by their parents, who had warned them not to neglect her. Fortunately, Dave had come up with a story that helped Stephanie feel included and ensured that she would be taken care of. After all, it was their mission from the Spanish governor of Peru. They continued to ride along in silence. Approaching Pine Island Bayou and that swampy creek began to engage an increasingly large portion of their thoughts. Dave and Sam had crossed the creek multiple times before, but usually when they did, they were following their dad and granddad and were looking for or driving some of the hundreds of cows that held the Crow brand back to the house. With Stephanie in tow, it was different. Dave was game as ever, but Sam felt the full weight of responsibility for them all. If something went wrong, it would be on him. He didn't know if crossing was worth it or not. Back in the second place in the column, Dave was again dealing with Paint's rough gait when all of a sudden, Sam stopped and threw up his hand. Wow, that's just the way Dad does it. Nice touch, he thought to himself. Then, totally in character, he asked, "What do you see, the Quechas?" "No, now hush, I hear something," Sam answered, then added, "For real, I hear something." He barely looked back when saying it as he was putting his hand down. All three of them strained to hear, bracing themselves to complete and utter silence. Apache shifted his weight and the saddle creaked. Dave shushed him pointlessly. Stephanie's congenial old sorrel Bud stomped a foot at a fly. Dave looked back and could see that Steph had her reins drawn up, doing her best to keep the horse quiet. The bald-faced bay Sydney that Sam rode stood motionless. That horse had style, Dave admired. He almost paced like the Tennessee Walker he had ridden at summer camp once. Dave mouthed to her, "Do you hear anything?" "No," she whispered back. Then they both heard it, in the distance, past the bayou, a dog barking. Sam looked back at Dave and Stephanie, and they both looked toward him. Sam pointed roughly south. Dave shook his head and pointed more to the north, clearly across the looming bayou. Sam looked past Dave at Stephanie, inquiring with his eyes. She also pointed the same direction Dave did. Sam asked, "Is that Buttons? I thought he was chained at the house." "So did I," Dave answered quietly. "He'll get loose of his collar sometimes. It could be him. Sounds like he's got something." "Yeah," he said just as quietly, and turned back to the front to listen. Buttons was a yellow black-mouthed cur that their granddad kept, one of three. There were other breeds that could hunt better, and other breeds that could herd better, but for finding cows in the thicket and then driving them home, there was no dog better than a cur dog. The boys knew that sound in the woods could be a mighty tricky thing. Not only was it possible that Buttons was traveling, the echo of his barks could rattle through the thicket and keep the true source of the sound a mystery. They waited for another sounding. There, still across the creek, but further north, more directly in front of them than before. Without a word, Sam put spurs to Sydney, and he lurched off toward the creek. Dave and Paint whipped up behind, and full of fear, young Stephanie hung on, as old Bud, not willing to be left behind, kicked it up and met the easy lope of the two lead horses. Easy lope may not have been the best way to describe it. Packed with saw vines, cedar, and haw trees, as well as the normal pine and hardwood, the big thicket was so thick in places that a man had to dismount to get through, and too thick to pass at all in others. Where it wasn't that thick, a man on a horse could get through, but only with the right horse and the right motivation. The pace they proceeded at was no faster than a rocking canter out in the open, but in the thicket this pace meant ducking branches, looking ahead to find an opening, and swapping rein hands so as to swat branches out of the way. On top of this, Sam and Dave both listened as best they could for Buttons as he conducted his own chase. Then the bayou. They managed to hit it at one of the good crossings, but it still meant a steep, muddy slope down about 4 feet, then another one back up, usually into a mess of thicket. Sam didn't even slow down, but he turned and hollered back, "Make sure she gets across, then come to me." Dave knew Sam had to stay on the dog if they were going to not lose her, but it irritated him all the same. He turned around and could see that Stephanie's hair had filled with twigs and leaves. Her ball cap was hanging unceremoniously behind her, being held only by her ponytail, and tiny scratches covered one cheek. She had tears in her eyes. "Looks like we need to get our princess a better hat next time," Dave offered with a smile, hoping they were not on the verge of a meltdown. Steph just nodded. "We got to cross here, Steph." He thought about asking her if she thought she could do it, but he didn't want to give her an out. Instead, he offered, "You want to wait across and I lead, Bud?" She shook her head. "Okay, just give him his head and lean down and hug his neck coming out the other side so you don't get bonked in the nose." She nodded again. Remembering that this crossing scared him as well, Dave had every intention of taking Apache across easily, but the old Paint would have nothing of it. The eager cow pony practically leapt into the bog and was up on the other side in 2 strides. Dave turned toward Stephanie and said unconvincingly, "See? Easy." Sensing his rider's discomfort, Bud took it as easy as he could. This was why he was the horse that the youngest always rode. He eased himself down the bank and bounded up the other side with as little drama as he could manage. For her part, Stephanie had more emotions rattling around in her than she could adequately sort out. She absolutely hated being left behind when the boys went to play, so she had resolved to never complain in hopes that she would not be a burden and they would keep bringing her. She admired her brothers very much. She suspected that she annoyed them, but they mostly did their best to not let it show to her. The better the action, the more likely they were to be irritated at her slowing them down. When she emerged on the far side unscathed, she found that she was both relieved and a little exhilarated. Dave came right up to her. "Are you good? That wasn't so bad, was it?" "Uh-huh," accompanied with a little nod. Not trying to determine which question her answer was for, Dave continued. "Now we got to go. We got to catch up with Sam. I think he stopped, but we got to get there quick, okay?" "Okay, don't leave me." "I won't, but don't fall behind neither." "Okay, let's go." And he and Apache headed off at a fast trot. Dave felt the pull of two notions. The first was to catch up to Sam as quickly as possible. Whenever they had chased Dad through the woods after hearing the dogs, he knew it was his first responsibility to keep up. He didn't really think about the fact that he was putting Sam in Dad's position. It just sort of happened. The other notion was to take care of his little sister. Dave had been in her shoes before with a sometimes over-exuberant older brother, so he had a little sympathy for her. He knew how scary that crossing can be, and Stephanie impressed him with how she handled it. Well, he thought, she is a crow. The barking had definitely grown louder, but Dave couldn't see Sam or Buttons at all. He slowed to a stop and heard Steph and Bud pull up behind. "Whoo!" he hollered. It was the standard call. "Here I am. Where are you?" "Whoo!" Sam answered from exactly where he had heard Buttons, and it didn't feel like he was moving anymore. Maybe he had caught up with him. He spurred Apache to a fast walk. After a couple of minutes of maneuvering through the woods, he saw Sam, waiting patiently and watching Buttons bay the small herd of cows that he had finally managed to stop. "You good?" he asked, raising his voice over the sound of cows and the dog. "All good." "Steph, you good?" He leaned forward when he asked. "I'm fine. We made it," she answered, pleased with herself and happy it was over. Sam started his report. He found about 20 or so and got them bayed up in this little pine patch. Don't know if you noticed, but Buckles came along too. Dave looked around and saw that the brindle cur male barked steadily on the other side of the small bunch of cows. As he was looking them over, Sam asked him, "You notice anything special about these?" Dave examined the herd closely and then saw it. "Why, that's that old gray Bremer bull. Dad says they haven't got him up in a year." He had just learned that year that whenever their dad or granddad said Bremer, they meant cattle that was of the Brahma breed. Sam answered, "Haven't gotten him up, haven't seen him. They'll be happy to hear he's still around." "Sam, there's almost half a dozen calves in there that ain't branded." Dave's normally precise suburban grammar tended to slip when he spoke of ranch matters. "Yeah," Sam looked a little worried about what Dave might say next. "We should bring him back," said Dave eagerly. Yep, that's what Sam was worried about. "You're crazy," he said. "We'll never make it. We might have a chance, just the two of us, with any other bunch of cows, but we have to watch out for Steph, and that's the old Bremer we're talking about." "So what? Steph's good. I'd rather have a third rider of any kind than just the two of us." "Dave, she's never even driven cows before with Dad and Granddad." "She's older than us when we went for the first time." Dave was leaning forward in his saddle now, anxious to make his point. "She can ride drag, and Bud knows what he's doing." Sam took a deep breath and sighed. It's not that he didn't want to try it, but if anything went wrong, he was the oldest, and it would be him that would bear the brunt of the punishment. Dave knew what he was thinking. "Look, I know it's your hide if something goes wrong, but all that we lose is the cows. If nothing else, we may at least get them across the creek for Granddad, and we can come back tomorrow with him and the other dog." Sam continued to stare blankly at the cows, deep in thought. "Just look at them. They're already winded and maybe won't put up much fight. If we're worried about Stephanie, we could take him north once we cross the creek, throw him up against the highway fence, and I'll ride drag. Steph can just keep up." Stephanie had had about enough of being talked about in the third person. A vague dread gripped her at the thought of actually trying to do this, but she didn't care for being the cause of not doing anything one bit. "I'll be fine. I can keep up," she said suddenly. They all waited, the cows standing still but for offering a kick or a lowered head to the still barking dogs. Finally, Sam turned toward them. All right, fine, but if something goes bad, you're taking whatever I get too. Deal? That's only fair, Dave smiled. And we're not going to the fence. If that gives way and they get out, then we will really be in trouble. So, Stephanie, you're going to have to keep pressing him from the back. Can you do it? Now she was scared again, but said as firmly as she could, you can count on me. All right, then. I'll take the right to keep him pointed away from the fence. Dave, you take the left. When we get to the creek, then you go ahead of them so they don't scatter when they get across. Stephanie and I will get crossed as quick as we can. The reality of what they were about to do was setting in, and now Dave wondered if this was a good idea after all. Seeing this, Sam said, let's just keep them slow and easy and we'll be fine. Y'all ready? Wait, Stephanie said suddenly. Mom and Dad said that when we start something big, we should pray about it. Sam answered, well, David, this was your idea. You better offer it up. Dave took off his hat and the others followed. Lord, maybe we should have prayed about this before deciding to do it, but if there's any way to help us get this old bull and his cows and calves to the pens today, please do it. Help us to not get hurt and help us to be good cowboys today and a cowgirl. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. They all put their hats back on, eased around the herd into position, and Sam let go with the best imitation of their dad. Hey-oh! And the drive was on. For a full minute, however, they wondered if it really was. The gentle calls that normally moved the herd along were not enough to actually get them started in a way they had no desire to go. They called out louder, no response. They moved up closer, still nothing. Finally, David had enough. He spurred Apache almost right into the recalcitrant herd, stood up in his stirrups, and screamed at the top of his 12-year-old lungs, "Get a move on, you sorry old cusses!" With that, the old gray Brahma bull picked his head up and turned away from the small boy on the big horse, picking his way through the brush, the cows and calves following obediently. After his little demonstration, Dave drifted over to the left side, staying to the back unless they started to drift too far his way. He would then pick up the pace and press through the low limbs to put a little pressure on. Sam, on the other side, would then slow up to give them room. If the cows started to get strung out, then one or both of them would pick up the pace to get more in front of them. This started to happen more and more frequently. "Keep the pressure on him," Sam would holler back to Stephanie, but still her little voice and newly budding confidence were not enough to keep the speed of the herd up. Finally, Sam turned his horse and went to the rear. Dave correspondingly eased back so as not to turn the cows too far to the right. "Look, Steph, you gotta stay on him." "Okay, I'm trying." "I know you are, but you gotta get mad at him a little." "Okay," she responded, clearly discouraged. "Bud's a great horse, but he can be lazy." Reaching over to a nearby branch, he deftly broke a limb from it about 2 feet long and an inch in diameter. After stripping the leaves from it, he handed it to his sister. "Use the switch to keep them right on their butts, okay? And here." He reached into the little pocket that exists between the seat of his saddle and the swell of the fork and pulled out about 4 wild lemons. "I've been picking these along the way. You take 'em. And if a cow falls behind, then pelt her in the rear with one of these. Got it?" She smiled. "Okay," taking the lemons and putting them in her saddle. "Atta girl." He smiled back and trotted back to his position as the cows were drifting. Soon after that, they were approaching the bayou crossing. Dave kept looking across the herd for some instruction from Sam. Crossing a group of cows over a creek or gully or any kind of defile was always a little tricky. Invariably, it was a chance for them to spread out or even get away completely. Normally, Dave often resented that Sam always played the leader when they were up to some imaginary game or project. Now that they were doing something for real, Dave knew that someone had to be in charge and call the shots, and that getting into a fuss or back-talking could cause a real problem. Plus, he knew that if it didn't go right, then Sam would be responsible. He had ideas about how to cross them over the bayou, but he would wait for Sam's cue. Back on his side of the herd, Sam was thinking the same thing. He hollered over the lowing herd, "Go ahead and get across." Good, Dave thought. He liked the chance to get ahead, to get in a chase, to see how fast he and Old Paint could go. It scared him, but moving fast on a good horse over rough terrain thrilled him like nothing else in the world. More real than any sport he ever played, more exciting than any ride at Astroworld, and none of his friends back in the suburbs understood it. And with that thought, he and Apache, sensing the urgency, ran ahead to the crossing he had used on the way out, the sound of movie soundtracks from Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Alamo repeating in his head as he went. Arriving at the creek, he bounded in and out with a lunge and moved off from the bayou about 30 yards, waiting to see what the cows would do when they crossed. Just in that short distance, the thicket briefly hid his brother, his sister, and the cows. He could see that they were coming, but couldn't immediately tell if they were having trouble. All of a sudden, he felt very alone. "Buttons! Buckles! Here, dogs!" He shouted as much like Dad and Granddad as he could. If they were on this side with him, he would have a better chance of keeping them bunched up while the rest crossed. Focusing as he was at the crossing, he almost missed the activity further down the creek to his right. What was that? He thought. More cows? Then the dreaded realization. Nope, same cows. With the left flank open, the wily cattle saw their opportunity and had started down the creek bank. Dave turned Apache and ran through the branches as fast as he could to get ahead of them going that way. Then he heard Sam behind them, shouting fanatically, trying to just get them across the creek no matter where they crossed. "You need me to come back over?" Dave hollered, still moving down his side of the creek. "No!" Sam didn't sound sure, but he would have to take him at his word. Finally, by twos and fours, the cows turned back to their right to cross the creek wherever they were. Once the last one crossed, Sam ran back to their original crossing, for it was the only one he could be sure that a horse and rider could cross safely. Plus, he had to see Stephanie across. Now Dave realized just how alone could be. The cows were more or less in a straight line facing him with no herd sense left in them at all. In a moment, they could scatter in all directions, and the whole thing would be lost, and it would be his fault. "I got to get him back to the others," he thought. "I got to keep them bunched." Apache knew it too. As one, they scooped up the cow that had gone the furthest and started pressing her back toward the main crossing. She was an old red lineback longhorn, and she started toward the others all right, and when she got caught up with them, they all bolted, heading generally in the correct direction away from the creek, but moving fast through the low limbs and brambles. For a moment, Dave thought, well, we gave it a good run. It was worth a shot. But before he knew it, the old dun paint tossed his head and started his pounding, impatient walk. Dave looked back at the creek. The crossing was barely even visible, he had faded so far upstream. Then he thought about riding up to Sam and Stephanie and letting them know that they had scattered. I do not want to do that, he thought. I do not want to be the one to say that we couldn't do it. Old Paint was still tossing his head. "Yeah, you're right, Apache." And giving the eager cow pony his head, with that they started punching through the thicket. Dave knew that little chance existed of him getting all the cows together, so as soon as he caught sight of her, he determined to at least steer that red line back in the general direction of the pens. From times past, he also knew that if you could just follow a bunch of cows for a while, they would eventually quit running. If he could make that line back quit, then the others may not be so flighty. Either way, his father's words echoed in the back of his mind. Sometimes, son, you have to keep fighting even though all chance of winning seems gone, just to show yourself and others that you didn't quit. Now, a good woods horse possesses all the same traits that any cow pony does, plus a few extra features that make him suited to that jungle-like environment. Apache had all of those features in abundance, and Dave was fast learning how to use them to best advantage. Mainly, the horse could tell what cow it was that Dave had targeted, and the horse kept a bead on the old longhorn. Here's where the relationship between rider and horse came in. Moving through the thicket consists of a series of split-second decisions about whether to go left or right around a particular tree and what barely visible path to take. For his part, Apache had learned, like any good woods horse, to leave room for a rider's legs when clearing a tree. He also knew that chasing a cow down was not enough. He must get around it, and he knew where that tipping point was that made a cow go back to a herd. Still, choices had to be made, and Dave sometimes let his horse choose, other times he would veto that choice. A good pony would respond to the veto quickly. Soon the palmetto flat would come back up, and Dave knew that that was their chance. In the thick of lemon trees, saw vines, and low-hanging live oak limbs, the old lineback had the advantage, but in the relatively clear palmetto field, a horse could close distance fast. Finally they got there, and Dave saw his target cow about halfway through, continuing to trot in a southerly direction, deeper into the woods and away from the wire gap that they were headed to. Dave put the spurs to, as if he needed to, and the two of them got the best sprint they could through the noisy fronds of the palmettos. Maybe, just maybe I can turn her here, he thought. He felt his horse sidestep ever so slightly, and he glanced down. Buttons trotted alongside and looked up at him. "Going ahead?" Dave yelled, and she made a beeline for the cow, to start baying her to a stop if possible, but at least to slow her. The dog knew where the gap was, too. Now, as he started to close distance and on her left side, Dave began to pour forth a steady stream of frantic calls and hollers that ran between actual swearing and complete gibberish. "Hold up, you old sorry outfit! Hey! Move your butt in there! Yah! Get on in there!" About clear of the palmettos, Buttons, in front now, barking furiously. "She's doing it," he thought. "She's drifting back north." Once they all cleared the palmettos, he became vaguely aware of more yelling behind him. "She's slowing down." Then he saw some of the other cows trotting their way, looking for a herd. "Here's your herd, you old rascals. Me and this here cow I just turned." Now he heard what had to be Sam with his own set of errant cows coming from the creek. Once he took notice of Dave, Buttons, and the red line back, he started pressing them closer. Stephanie rode right alongside him, giving her best hollers. "I didn't expect to find you here," Sam offered with a smile once they all reunited. Dave smiled back, knowing he had done well, for when the cows that Sam had been bringing up arrived, he saw that there were several calves amongst them. Had Dave not stopped the stray longhorn, they would never have found a place to join up together, and the cows would have continued in all directions. "You think you can hold these here while I make another loop to get the rest of them?" Sam asked. "I think so," Dave responded with a little apprehension. "Just don't take your time." "Oh, I won't. Keep Buttons here, and I'll take Buckles." And Sam was off. Dave positioned Stephanie on the other side of the growing herd, and they all waited, tensely. The cows were resting for now, but they didn't know how long that might last. Sam seemed to take forever, but every now and again they could hear him yelling at something, and then a couple of cows would trot up to the waiting herd, wild-eyed and glad to see some allies. Finally, the old Brahma bull eased his way up into the group, acting like he had been waiting for them all to gather so he could address them as a group. This old bull wasn't mean, and he wasn't flighty, he was just plain stubborn. And when he got to the herd, he just kept on walking, dragging the rest of the cows along with him, again drifting well south of the due westerly direction they wanted to go, despite all of Dave and Stephanie's protests. Sam came up, and Dave yelled at him, "They're moving again!" "Let him go! Just keep squeezing him," Sam responded, falling into the drag slot. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. Dave kept going back and forth, up and down the left flank of the herd, pressing them back north while Sam kept driving them from the rear, keeping them bunched up. Stephanie was on the right flank now, but they had no interest in going that way for whatever reason. Sam took a quick moment to trot over to his sister's position. "Stephanie," she knew something was up when he used her full name, "you've done real good, and I know it's been hard, but I need something from you." "Okay," she responded as they walked along, keeping one eye on the cows. "Fact is, I can't remember if that gap to the pens is open or not." "Uh-huh." "Once we get them through there, they can ride the fence. That's a good fence all the way to the pens. But if they hit that gap and it's closed, we'll lose it all." "Okay." She wondered why he was saying this. "You need to get ahead and open the gap." Steph's heart dropped. She had gotten pretty comfortable just sticking with the boys, but now Sam wanted her to go ahead by herself. "But that gap is really tight. I don't know if I can open it." "I think you can. Just reach through the wires and push with your shoulder while you slip the wire off the top. I think you can do it. Besides, you have to do it. These cows will string out if I leave, Dave. I need to stay." "But I can't get back on by myself. I can't reach the stirrup." "By the time we get there, you won't need to get back up. Just lead off to the side and we can get them to the pens. It's just a couple of 100 yards. "I don't know," she said unsteadily. "I know you don't, but I do." Dave shouted from over the herd, "Hey, I'm going to lose them." Sam looked back. "I need to get back. Go on ahead as straight as you can and as fast as you can. Bud won't take you anywhere you can't go. If you get back on the trail, you'll go right to it." "Okay." She was really scared now because she knew she was going to have to do this. "Go, now." And Sam raced back to the straggling cows. Now Stephanie was really scared, but she trotted off as best she could. Bud may not have known exactly what was going on, but he certainly sensed that it was urgent to get ahead and that they were no longer minding the cows. Where was she going now? Sam had pointed generally ahead, but she wasn't sure where that was anymore. She managed to get past the front of the cows and then realized that if she just managed to keep the sound of the boys directly behind her, then she might find the gap. Bud really understood that they needed to move now, and he kept a steady but rough trot. Sam and Dave had tried to teach her how to sit a trot, but she never got it really well. It was easier to just stand in the stirrups, but her legs soon became tired. She sat down and slowed the horse to a walk. "Keep going," she heard. It was Dave. She looked back and realized that she hadn't gotten that far ahead. "I can't do it," Stephanie thought to herself angrily. "I'm just a girl and I'm too little. I'm going to mess it all up and they're going to be mad at me." Tears started down her cheeks, streaking the sweat and dirt on her face. However, almost without even realizing it, she kicked Bud again and slapped her reins on his neck, and he went back to the trot. Then, all of a sudden, she realized that before her lay the stock trail that had led them into the woods that morning. The way was almost completely open to her. She looked back. The lead cow was about 20 yards behind her, and she could see Dave fighting a saw vine with both hands that he had got caught in. His face was bloody. She could also hear Sam urging the tail end on. Not much time. Encouraged, she kicked Bud again, and he broke into a gentle lope. After a couple of strides of bouncing around, she found the rhythm and gave him his head. Now came the laughter. For some reason, a good lope affects kids this way, and despite her tears and her fear, she grasped the horn and laughed goofily. The more she laughed, the faster the horse went. At this rate, she pulled ahead swiftly, and with the open trail in front of her, she saw the gap and desperately pulled back on the reins, but nothing happened. She was hitting herself in the chest with her fist, but Bud kept on, seemingly oblivious to the coming barrier. Then she remembered. Choke up! She let go of the horn and grabbed a fistful of rein with that hand and began pulling again. Now the slack tightened, and Bud lurched to a halt almost directly in front of the gap. Thrown forward by the sudden stop, Stephanie grabbed the horn with both hands and slipped off the saddle and almost to the ground. Getting her feet under her, she looked around. She couldn't see the boys, but she could definitely hear them. Bud lowered his head as always so she could slip the reins over his ears, and she led him to the gap. Looping the reins over her left shoulder, she reached through the sharp, barbed wires with her right arm and took hold of the tree that the wire gap was fastened to. One barb grabbed her shirt and the skin of her shoulder, tearing both, but she hardly noticed. To the left, she looked up the trail. No cows yet. She squeezed the post and the tree together, fumbling for the wire loop that held them. No luck. The wire held fast. Again, a look up the trail. Bud had stepped in the way and she could barely see, but the yelling of the boys grew louder. Again, she squeezed, but she couldn't draw the post close enough to the tree. "I can't do it," she thought in fear. "No, you have to. Don't be a little sissy girl," she scolded herself. Now she was mad. She looked up the trail and now she could see the red line back. She repositioned, putting her face right on the barb-encrusted post and planting it right in the crook of her shoulder. With all her might, she squeezed and grunted and pulled the tree toward her. Reaching up, she felt the loop. It was loose. She pushed it up, but it didn't quite reach. One more groan and a mighty push and another try. Loose! She allowed one last look up the trail, and the cows were almost right on top of her. She saw Sam in the back, standing in his stirrups and straining to see if the gap was open. She dropped the now loose post, and the barbs made a long mark down her arm, tearing her shirt again. She reached down and grabbed it, leading the horse through and dragging the gap back around the corner and out of the way. Not 10 seconds later, the first cow hit the gap. She continued to back out of the way as the cows came through and drifted away from the fence. They weren't going the right way, but there was nothing she could do but watch all of them go through and look for new ways to turn. Finally, the last cow emerged, and Sam and Dave rushed through. They both went at a full run to the north, working around the cows like pros and turning them back to the fence that would take them to the pens. When they got them back in order, Sam was now on the right flank and Dave was behind, the fence leading off from the gap serving as the left flank. For an instant, Stephanie thought she was looking at her dad and granddad. They were so grown up. Once the cows were all together again, Sam ran ahead and opened the gate to the pens. Utterly defeated, the cows, the calves, the old Brahma bull, and the red line-back longhorn all entered the pens with resignation. Stephanie began leading her horse to catch up. By the time she got there, they were all afoot, and Dave was shutting the gate, offering a little prayer of thanks that he would make sure was formalized at dinner that night. Sam was coming right for her, and when he reached her, she got the biggest hug that she had ever gotten. Dave now led up and threw in his hug, and for a good several seconds they stood there. Sam broke the embrace and stepped back, looking at Stephanie. "You did it. You are sure one to ride the trail with," he said. "Well, I wouldn't have sent her, but I'll know next time. Old Stephanie can get it done," Dave added. "Hey," Sam offered. Nothing left now but to go tell Granddad, knowing that this would be the proud moment for them all. They would unsaddle, walk into the house, and let Granddad and Grandmother know that they had pinned the old Brahma bull and his bunch, and that tomorrow they could brand the calf that had been eluding them for a year. Then he would call their dad and brag on them to him, and Dad would tell Mom, and they would all be proud of what they had just done. Those were moments that they all looked forward to. Sam helped Stephanie back onto Bud, and side by side they walked their ponies back to the barn, reviewing and preserving in their heads every detail of their adventure in the thicket. For it would be those memories, along with many others, that would equip them to be the teacher, engineer, and officer that they would eventually grow to be. In less than a week, they would be back in the suburbs, going back to school like any other kid returning from spring break. But instead of stories of visits to Six Flags or trips to the beach, they would have stories that many of their friends would neither understand nor even believe. It would be back to homework, band practice, and trying not to miss the bus. But today, they were mighty. They had come across their challenge, chosen the hard thing, and had come out on top. They rode back to the house in triumph and delight, and the Pevensies of Narnia, the Fellowship of the Ring, the Sackets, and all the crows before them rode with them. Author's note. This marks the beginning of the first of a series of stories on the fictional Crow family. Many authors aspire to write the historical epic of an American family such as those created by Mitchler and Lamore. But after years of struggling with what to name my fictional family, I finally landed on my own name. I will feel free now to diverge from the history of the actual Crow family in order to tell the stories I want to tell, but certainly this story harkens back to some of the adventures that me and my cousins enjoyed when we were young. So although Samuel, David, and Stephanie are loosely based on me and my cousins, I will take them in different directions in the future, and their ancestors will also vary from our own. It should be noted that although the Crow siblings in this story are fictitious, Buttons and Buckles are what you would call composite characters. Sidney, Apache, and Bud are the actual historical characters on which we had our own adventures. I dedicate this story to Nathan and Shannon and Ethan.